Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to officially start our significant event today, please kindly stand up for the national anthem of the Kingdom of Cambodia. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, now the main agenda that we have been waiting for is finally here, which is the panel discussion on inclusive development model in Cambodia, poverty reduction, social protection, and resilience. All presentations and discussion will be moderated by our moderator, Ms. Alissar Chaker, resident representative of Cambodia. So without further ado, please join me and give a big warm welcome to Ms. Alissar Chaker.
Thank you, Oren Susdai. A very good morning to all the audience with here today, physically with us today, but also those who are connected online. I would like also to welcome the young university student joining us through streaming. I hope that this discussion would be useful to really catalyze the reflection, but also to accelerate the partnerships to support Cambodia attaining its development ambitions in an inclusive, resilient, and green manner. Without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Ivan to set a little bit the context for this discussion before moving directly into the insights and the information shared by the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alissar, and welcome everyone. Let me share my screen for this short presentation. Okay. Excellencies and colleagues, allow me to make a very brief account of the impressive progress made by Cambodia in the last 30 years. Using some of the available indicators published in the most recent Human Development Report launched last week. According to the report, from 1990 to 2021, Cambodia real gross national income per capita fourfolded, increasing from $1,008 per capita to $4,078 per capita. That impressive economic growth helped to improve some of the key social indicators as well. For example, maternal mortality ratio fell by 81.8%, from 879 deaths per 1,000 live births in 1990 to 160 in 2017 and the following years. Life expectancy at birth increased by more than 14 years to surpass 70 since 2016. Even with a slight decline in 2020 and 2021 due to COVID-19, the progress made in 30 years is impressive. In the same period, many mean years of schooling grew by 2.4 years to reach 5.1 years of mean schooling since 2019. While the expected years of schooling surged by 4.4 years, reaching 11.5 years in this period. With these improvements in income, health, and education, the Human Development Index increased by 56.9%, reaching the medium human development category. As we can see in the picture, in 30 years, Cambodia went from a mostly farming economy to a dynamic economy with engines like manufacturing, exports, construction, and tourism. However, economic growth will not be enough to tackle the remaining deprivations and to reach those who have been left behind. Just to illustrate some of the remaining challenges, in the graph you can see 94% of Cambodians 75 years and older do not have any kind of pension. 88% of the working force remains in informality. Almost 57% of households use solid cooking fuels like wood and charcoal, and about 56% of the population live in dwellings with inadequate housing materials. 30% are overcrowded at home, 24% do not enjoy adequate sanitation, 21% do not have access to clean drinking water, and 17.8% remain monetary poor. Furthermore, the new development model, in addition to be inclusive, has to reach those, inclusive to reach those left behind, has to be prepared to face the current challenges like COVID-19, the disruption of value chain, the fuel and food prices created by the war in Ukraine, and seasonal floods and other natural disasters. But also emerging challenges like the need to diversify the economy, improve competitiveness, productivity, and the future of work, for example, in the context of Industry 4.0, the transition to graduation LDC, and obviously the global warming and climate change. But Cambodia had an important lesson learned from COVID-19. Government's people-centered investment in the ID Poor Cash Transfer Program proved to be effective not only to prevent people from sliding back into poverty, but also to stimulate the economy. According to the macroeconomic modeling conducted by UNDP and the Ministry of Economy and Finance that we have presented many times before. Even in the context of the current war in Ukraine, preliminary findings of this macroeconomic modeling shows that cash transfer program and other stimulus measures mitigate the negative effects of fuel and fuel price increase in terms of GDP growth, unemployment, and monetary poverty. This is supporting the post-pandemic economic recovery in Cambodia. Furthermore, the recently published evaluation of the ID Poor Cash Transfer Program conducted by UNDP and the National Social Protection Council show positive impact at household level in indicators such as having enough food at the house, higher chances of having some cash savings, less chances of taking additional loans, keeping children at schools, and improving the perception of national and local authorities. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to share with you in this presentation some preliminary findings from an ongoing study from UNDP on the determinants of poverty in Cambodia. According to this research, moving out of poverty in Cambodia is associated to the urban context, being harder for households in rural areas to find paths to move out of poverty. It's also related to higher years of schooling, especially at secondary level. And in terms of occupation, for those in manufacturing and services, the probability of scaling up in the socioeconomic ladder is higher, but much harder for those in elementary occupations. Finally, better housing conditions, such as access to basic services, seem to be a relevant factor for people to move out of poverty. All these findings on the determinants of poverty in Cambodia make a case for the adoption of a multidimensional approach of progress, a vision of progress beyond income with more and better data. And it's precisely on this spirit that we are working in a platform that links big data, satellite images, and the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning to estimate relevant socioeconomic indicators across the country, even in places where no data has been collected. We hope to be able to share this platform very soon. We are convinced that this will be an asset in terms of early warning, geographical prioritization, etc. Let me finish this presentation with something that is of great relevance, and is how is Cambodia going to finance this new inclusive development model? In order to doubling down on people-centered investment, it will be imperative to expand the financing resources, the financing sources. In the last 20 years, Cambodia moved from an ODA-dependent country to a country where one of the most important source of financing for development is domestic revenue, as you can see in the graph in the slide. Financing for sustainable development will require increasing and strengthening tax revenue, but also exploring additional and innovative financing mechanisms, from green and thematic bonds to impact investment, from private sector resource mobilization to crowdfunding. This year, the joint program on integrated national financing frameworks, the INFF, will end, but we look forward to keep supporting the Royal Government of Cambodia together with other development partners in exploring some of these innovative financing mechanisms. Thank you very much.
With this very brief overview of the latest reflections and latest advances in Cambodia, I would like to move to our discussion. The presentation have highlighted the great progress Cambodia has achieved before the pandemic, but also the response that the government has implemented to reduce the development losses, but it also highlighted certain vulnerabilities that need to be taken into consideration to have a resilient economy, but a resilient society. Indeed, the planetary imbalance, the geopolitical crises, the pandemic have all changed our lives and livelihoods, but they also changed the way, societies are governed. These have hit the poorest, those who are left furthest behind the most. How can we include these people again in the development path of Cambodia? With this, short introduction, I would like to revert to Ms. Kanni Wignaraja, Assistant Secretary General and UNDP Assistant Administrator and Director of the UNDP Regional Bureau for Asia and the Pacific. Ms. Kanni has a very long experience, in different parts of the UN, but also outside the UN. Within the UN, she has experience in UN missions, in the Development Cooperation Office, where she was the director for before joining her current position. Ms. Kanni has a master's in public administration and development economics from Princeton University, but also a bachelor degree in economics from Bryn Mawr College in the US. She is a keen advocate for development, particularly in the Asia and the Pacific, where she is an expert on many issues relating to the development in this part of the world. Kanni, welcome to Cambodia again. And I would like, to start this discussion with your impressions and assessment of the global and regional context that we all keep on talking about and how it plays off in the Asia-Pacific region. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alissar, and it is wonderful to see Excellency Samheng Boros outside of the Zoom lens, where we have had discussions. Also, Secretary of State Van Phala, thank you very much for joining us. And Jyotsana, I think, come to Cambodia as the new ADB country director. For me, this is a very special return visit. Actually, my first mission as when I joined the UN straight out of graduate school, I arrived and landed in Cambodia. So you can imagine, with a backpack and a pen and a notepad, because we didn't have laptops or smartphones then, all over the tracking development that was going to come after the transition. So to see what is going on in the country is very special for me. So I want to just put it in context with some of the issues in the region and globally. Now we talk about the fact that our health as human beings and the health of the planet, it is so evident that these are inextricably linked. I think sadly for many, it took COVID to understand this. We are not done with these pandemics, but I think we all understand that decisions taken on one side of that equation immediately impact the other. So this is not to say, oh, we can look after the planet's health separately, our health separately. These are just connected, and we have been very harshly reminded of this. So my first point is that this is the first time in global history we have seen, well, since we were tracking it so closely from 1990, that human development globally has fallen across the board 2 years in a row. Now we can say that is COVID, but I think we have to look, unpack that a little more. Because if we were well prepared to address a pandemic like COVID, we would not have had such a dramatic drop in human development across the world. So it's, I would say to our participants that we should be careful just saying, oh, it was COVID. It had a big part to play in it, but it means we were not prepared. So the question is, what can we do? Because we're going to have more pandemics. We're going to have climatic shocks. We're going to have conflicts. What is the investments that we put in? Well, say, oh, unfortunately, because of COVID, human development across the world fell this way. Now, the second key point that I wanted to say is this shows up a lot in we deal with food security, water, and energy security. And again, what I am, been looking at how countries in the region that I cover, including in this Mekong basin, are dealing with these three issues. And the whole concept of security has changed. And so in the world at large, we saw how much supply chains, including in food and water and energy, just broke down, and how vulnerable it left countries. We didn't even have to wait for the war in Ukraine to see this happen. So again, the question is, and I hope with the panel that will deep dive into Cambodia, what is it that are the consideration of trade-offs? Because it's always trade-offs. You invest in one, you have to invest a little bit less in another. You build capabilities here, it means you make different fiscal choices in other places. So it'll be interesting to see how one tackles this. Certainly for UNDP, when we look at what is the most stubborn challenge in this country or any other in our region, it is that getting rid of extreme poverty. And this to me is a right people of state, of private sector, in looking at the fact that we just have to do away with saying X% of our population is still under the poverty line, while the top end of our populations get extremely wealthy. So what are the policies, the investment choices that really not just close that gap, but get rid of those who have to keep falling behind and taking the brunt of all these crises, so that we don't talk about the numbers below a poverty line anymore, but really look at a fairness and a justice of everyone benefiting from this growth. You know, we're seeing the sharpest price increase, cost of living increase since 1970. Again, across the world, this is something that is hurting everyone. So I do want to say that while everyone is measuring success by GDP measures, I think it is heartening to see in countries like Cambodia that we're opening up this conversation to say what causes that sense of vulnerability beyond income. And I think I'm sitting with a panel that is on the same wavelength on this, and this is conversations we have had the privilege of having. So let me end with an optimistic note, and again, look across the region and give you maybe the 3 or 4 things that countries are putting in place that are pushing them forward, despite the shock of the last 2 years. And remember, Cambodia didn't fall behind as much as some others. Cambodia fell back to its 2018 human development numbers. Many other countries fell back much further than that. So the first is raising the level of climate ambition. And this country is showing through its leadership that it is pushing to reach higher levels to lower its carbon footprint, which is small already, but also putting an energy plan, an environmental protection plan that is very ambitious and very progressive. So the question now is, how can we all together help this country to deliver that? The second is investments in people's capability. In fact, if you ask me, I would put that first. No country can develop without seeing capabilities of people as their top investment choice. And so a lot of that is through what one is doing in education, what one is doing in social protection, always seen as an investment, not as a cost to the budget. And the third area is, this is very specific, which is the sooner this is a mine-free country, the sooner a lot of rural Cambodia can get on with their lives and livelihoods without fear. And I think that is something, again, for UNDP, is a big area of support. And the last issue is the cost of money. I would say that I see LDC graduation not as a challenge. I see it as a huge opportunity for this country to reach out and tap sources of financing that are cleaner, greener, and just better for development. And so I hope, welcome, Minister, Excellency, lovely to see you again. But I think the ability to find investment that matches the aspirations of this country, I think that is the key. So I would actually see, I hope this country stays on course with LDC graduation, because there's far more opportunity out there than challenge. Thank you, Alissar.
Thank you, Kanni. Thank you, Kanni. I would like to pick up on a point, mainly relating to people's capabilities. And with the launch of the UNDP Human Development Report and the regressions that we have been seeing, one of the main premises of the report is doubling down the effort on human development. how is it so? You know, we spoke about education, we spoke about social protection, and what could this mean, you know, in a country, for a country like Cambodia, doubling down the investment in people rather than seeing it as a cost? Thank you.
You know, I'm very biased on this. If you ask me if I had just $1 left and you ask me where will I put it, I will put it in girls' education. Across the world, the countries that early on invested in health and education, which is at the heart of people's well-being, you saw those countries also being able to withstand the shock of COVID or conflicts much better than others. If I just take my own country, Sri Lanka, that has gone through 30 years of war, now going through a huge situation of debt distress, you can still see the resilience of people and the human development indicators of people because of decades of investment in primary healthcare and in education of both girls and boys. I would also say for Cambodia, the fact that you are betting growth is a big one. And I hope that the country stays the course on. It's not easy, but with the competition in the region, let alone in the world, a niche market for this country is to show that it can adjust its production and consumption in ways that will attract the new investor, the young investor in areas. And they are looking not just for a financial return, they are looking for a return on social indicators and on environmental indicators. So this is something, and I was discussing also with our minister in the audience, thank you for joining us, that this is a huge opportunity for this country. And maybe the third area is that it is a country that is not shy to test new areas. It is bold. And so the areas of innovation, digital transformation is going to leapfrog a lot of challenges maybe, or obstacles or slowdowns that other countries face. So these to me unpack the doubling down on investing in human development. Thank you, Alissar.
Thank you. Thank you. So with this, you know, I would like to move a little to His Excellency Samhang Boros. Inequality is widening the gap within countries globally, but also in Cambodia. And it's affecting mostly and disproportionately those who are vulnerable, who are poor. Why old approaches are not working anymore? And being a strong advocate and a policy champion for multidimensional approach, what does this bring? Why is adopting this approach important? Why are you so passionate about it? Please let us know.
Thank you, Alissar. I think the question was, why is the old approach not working, and why was I passionate about it? But I think maybe just touch on a bit on what Kanni, the Assistant Secretary General, is talking about. At the same time, how do we see the future of Cambodian investment going in terms of solving this, what we are looking at right now, right? How do we strengthen this country forward? So for me, the old model, I think we have been known as one of the strongest economic growth in Cambodia for quite some time. 7% growth over the years. We discussed this with Sipan Pala for a long time. While we're doing this, we're able to create a lot of jobs, a lot of wealth throughout the country. But with the last report that came out with by Ministry of Planning with the World Bank on monetary poverty, the number came up to about 17.8%. So COVID have an impact on the rate a bit, where it's supposed to go way below 10, and then it's just jumped right back to 17. But we also went a bit further and tried to understand where the population look. So what I found out was we still have certain area that still have a very large scale of poverty. One of the commune, the rate came up to around 70%, right? So in this case, then we have to start thinking further. Why is this happening? Is the model still going well toward it? So what I also went to do, we actually this last just 2 weeks, I think about last month, we did a study with World Food Program. We did a study on minimum expenditure basket. So we take the CSS data that we have by Ministry of Planning also. We try to understand the expenditure throughout the population cycle. So we divide into 100% the quantile, the top 20%, the bottom 20, and the middle 60. By doing this, we didn't analyze the top 20, we analyzed the middle 60 and the bottom 20. So what we found out was the lowest population expenditure per family, per person, came up to about $50 per person, where the poverty line by monetary poverty is about 80. Of course, we put 80 at the national area, but at rural area is about 60 plus. So this poverty line just right under that. But from the next 20% to 80% population side, you also found the number on average is around an 80, just below $90. Which means looking at this expenditure, because we don't have a measurement on how much income they're coming in their household. So what we can measure on terms of how are they spending their money. So that would also allow us to understand, because people will spend on what they have in a certain area and the level of living standard they have. So by looking at this, what we're able to reflect is that they are not too far off the poverty line into the next group. So looking at this, I have to come up with another plan. I start thinking, going further deep down. And what we have in terms of identify the lowest quantile or the most vulnerable group right now, we have a tool that called, I think, IDPO, poverty identification, that we done by Ministry of Planning. But within this identification, is also allow us to have a survey and questionnaire identify household. And that would come around 700,000 household. And we are still including more people coming in with the near poor group even right now. That would able to allow us to maybe engage in terms of into around, I would say around 5 million people out of 15 million. So we're looking at about 33% of the population. So I still have a lot of, for me, as the policymaker, I keep asking myself, am I making policy blind? Do I have enough evidence and data for me to provide to my budget mate for them to have a clear-cut decision? This is the way to go. So by looking at this, ID poor only allow us to know who is poor, but we don't know why they are poor. Right? That's one thing. Second, we only see the lowest quantile group. We are not able to see the rest of the population size. And we don't know who are we excluding and who are we the exclusion area that we might have. So then this is where I can connect to your second question. Why am I that conclude my idea of the old model of evaluation maybe have to think differently and allow me to start going further. Why am I advocating for MPI? So MPI would allow me to, at least now, I would have a map. I can test out and allow me to see why our population deprived, what population are deprived of. Certain area, what is the need, that why are these area poor? Have a lot of population in still poor. Are they poor because of the lack of job, the lack of clean water, the lack of healthcare, the lack of schooling, the lack of economic change? So all of that, that's what we want to understand. And further, and when you understand this, you're also able to realize that most of this decision should not be at the top at all. It should be happening from the local grassroots level governance, where a commune should able to actually inject their budget into tackle some issue that they can do. even district level should have an ability to solve their problem, because if they see all this problem within there and able to have a lot of evidence for us too, at the top of national policy maker, be able to see the whole evidence throughout the system. So for me, I believe that the MPI is really important. But I think this is also, I want to be clear. In Cambodia, we don't want to confuse our population either. What our government able to tackle monetary poverty, we have done a great job. So that's why I've been advocating. We don't call it MPI, because that would be a confusion of multidimensional poverty where we are getting confused. So we asked right now, we asked to change that. We're actually using the different name. We asked to call it multi-vulnerability index. So that would allow us to see rather where is the vulnerability coming from instead. So rather than poverty coming from, right? So this is maybe just respond to your question.
Thank you. You even preempted my second question, you know, like how this will affect your work, you know, at the Ministry of Social Affairs, Veterans and Youth. So if we unpack it a little bit, you said that it will help you to be more efficient, to target better, to take the decision, you know, also, you know, it touches on governance, where to take the decision. It touches on financing, how to finance, you know, the subnational priorities, you know, to reach the most poor. But if I want to take it a little bit further, you know, in terms of social groups, how would this also support you to target certain marginalized or vulnerable social groups, not only households?
Right. So if you talk about marginalized group, this is even further. We have to think. The MPI should even allow us to see even better, because we keep thinking that our population policy, we make a certain policy, we believe that it could be one model fit all. But when you work with the marginalized group, you realize that it's not true. Even we provide a decent work plan for a population, but when you look into disability people, it doesn't matter if you're not tailor-made your policy to what them exactly need, they will not be able to access your policy. Rather, if you have to tailor-made most of the policy towards them, even elderly is the same thing right now. I think people are now, the life expectancy in Cambodia start to grow. And if that discrimination again, allowing elderly to have job, I think that income would be in trouble, because we are still only at this early stage of providing pension and for private sector. And even right now, we are advocating, we are working right now to discuss, because we are looking to expand this social protection right in the future for poor family, we call an elderly allowance. So at the same time, we actually try to advocate which one do we go? Do we want to go universal allowance for the elderly, 75? If we have the same amount of budget, do we go 75 and above? Or we give to the poor family, poor elderly? So even the question here right now, you can easy to ask. We are still thinking right now, if we have, let's say, $30 million to give to elderly people, why don't we give to the poor elder? Because if you go to universal, there would be elderly that are not supposed to be receiving it, they would be able to access it. But after I put this advocacy out, I started to realize that the bigger impact that could create is the exclusion area won't be there anymore. The inclusion area won't be there anymore. And be able to allow a contract between government and their population, where citizens will feel like, my government will take care of me. It doesn't matter who they are, what I am, but they will feel a certain confidence. So now, as a policymaker right now, I have to balance this. How do I continue to put this forward in terms of my my leadership to actually see where to balance this decision as it's further. And even on top of that, maybe I just want to throw another thought in. Social protection investment. I think our country have been grow. I think the model that have allowed Cambodia to grow this far is everyone fight for their livelihood. Everyone work hard, everyone push themselves. So this cash transfer has been a success. I think we all seen that. And I can tell you what it means. Every household right now currently receive about $40 per household. per month on average. However, if you look into the expenditure per day, what does that mean? I thought to look into the expenditure per day. It means that in a day they would need about when I did the minimum expenditure, I found out that they spend $30 a month on food alone. So which means they need about 33 cents for one meal a day per person. And that's what we did. When you divide $40 a month and you divide it into it, it's one meal per household, right? Per member of the household. So that's what we're able to allow. But it costs us about over 700 million right now. And we are maneuver a lot of budget from other ministry. And we're also taking some money from the reserve that we have, right? Saving that we have. So there's a lot of stress on us, a lot of the budget, and the revenue are not much improved. How do we shut down more program to allow this to happen or not? What are we doing, right? So this is what's going on. But at the same time, I'm trying to apply different advocacy where we don't want to teach them, we don't want to give them fish consistently, but we want to teach them how to fish. So I think this is the next stage of social protection that we're looking for, that we might learn to do. And I think this, I can share this later, where we actually right now, I believe that we could have a model that we could provide skill, market, and even asset for our lowest quintile to work toward. So this is something that maybe we are looking to do right now in the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency Boros. Obviously, listening to you, the last mile is inevitably a longer journey in most countries. So, and this last journey would need also financing. And this is why I will move to His Excellency Fala. Excellency Fala joined the Ministry of Economy and Finance and the Supreme National Economic Council in 2004. He played a key role in a number of reforms, including the public financial management reform. He is very involved in the ASEAN affairs. He has his prints on the new investment law, on the SMEs co-financing scheme of the SMEs Bank. And this is all to improve, financial inclusion for SMEs. Dr. Fala has completed his PhD in economics from Australia. So I'm very humbled. All the panel is very well knowledgeable and with lots of, experience and qualifications. So looking at your qualification in the area of finance and financing, if I ask you to pick up only one issue, what is the most critical issue relating to Cambodia's aspiration for becoming in 2030 an upper middle income country, and by 2050, a high income country? In your perspective, the one issue that is the most important according to you, how should it be addressed or accelerated? Over to you.
Thank you very much for the question. My respect to Her Excellency Minister, Excellency, colleagues, panelists. It's nice to see a lot of, good policy maker in this room. And we are here just, two of us here from the government and many experts, in the room here. I think, what we can say is that Cambodia has in the last 30 years developed and has had a high economic growth, like what he said, 7% on average, based on the growth of labor, pretty much. This is very typical for economic development in every country, that starting from nothing, so we pretty much based on labor and natural resources. Another word is land frontier. But again, moving towards 2030, 2050, we cannot depend on this land and labor anymore. I think the only thing that we have to do to move forward and to maintain this momentum of growth and prosperity is to improve productivity. The word productivity itself is quite, comprehensive in nature. Because if you want to have a higher productivity, you must have a lot of components in that. And this productivity, we consider this productivity very important. And the government has even set up a productivity committee for the whole government. And the committee is chaired by my Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Economy and Finance. So they have already formulated what they call the productivity, Cambodia's productivity policy, 2035, I think, as I remember. With this, to move productivity higher, there are a lot of components. For example, I totally agree that we have to invest in human capital. There's nothing better than investing in your own people. Of course, in the last 10 years, the government has invested heavily in education sector, primary education. I think the budget for Ministry of Education has increased fourfold in the last 10 years, for this matter. At the same time, we have invested a lot also in the TVET education, vocational training. In the last 2-3 years, as a part of COVID, COVID stabilization program, we know that workers in the government, in tourism, sectors and other affected sector that, they may lose their job, they may not have anything to do. So we try to prepare them for new skill, reskill, retraining. And we have invested heavily in terms of building the infrastructure for the TVET sector. And I think in the next few years, infrastructure wise will be, I don't want to say complete, but will be, there will be a lot of infrastructure around the country. But at the same time, I think we, like my colleague just mentioned that, we don't want to give them fish, every time. So we want to teach them how to fish. And especially for those population segments that are vulnerable. So, so far we have Poor 1 and Poor 2 in our target that, from this economic recovery policy that have been formulated and, set for the implementation by the government last year, we have a policy that those are in the Poor 1 and Poor 2 can go for TVET education for free, no tuition fee payment, and also they can get some allowance, for their study. I think this is something that we try and see, how many from Poor 1 and Poor 2 will join the program, because in the past, I think they said, they may have said that, they don't have time to go and study because C1, C2, C3 certificate program, it took them a year to complete. So the Ministry of Vocational Training, Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training, they changed the program to about 5 months, 4.5 to 5 months. And also the program, they can go to study in evening, at 5 o'clock. So they have daytime to go for their own living. After that, go to, for vocational training. And then after that, on the top of that, they get some allowance. I think this is something that we have already implemented this, and we will see, what will be the response, the demand from the public, especially Poor 1 and Poor 2 category. This is only, on the human development. But again, I think productivity requires other, for example, infrastructure development, logistics. In the infrastructure, I think in the last 4 or 5 years, we have also, invested heavily. You see major infrastructure, road number 5 from Phnom Penh to and this is an important economic pole. expressway from Phnom Penh to Sihanoukville, the port development, the deep sea port development in Sihanoukville, a lot of those infrastructure have been built and will be completed in the next couple of years. I mean, for those, so I think to be ready to move the country, especially industry forward into another, to another level. One more is the new investment law that we have. I think we took the time of COVID, for 2 years that we didn't have anything to do, but I mean, the bad time. So we try to make that into like our opportunity. So we revised the investment law that this time we target better. I mean, what we call the smart incentive, and target higher value added industry. When I say it, we don't mean to abandon garment. No, garment is still the priority, one of the important industry for our growth. But again, we have to move further. We have to move up the scale, up the value chain, and in that, we target automotive industry, we target electronics, and this investment law. Right now, we are almost completing our the sub-degree for the implementation of this law, and hopefully, once the all these completes, then it will become. I think when we have consulted with the private sector, they are very happy to see this law, and they cannot wait to see the sub-degree, so they can take advantage of this law. There are many other things that, of course, for this productivity to be improved, we have done. And, for example, in terms of logistics, we have also tried to cut short, because logistics is important for time and money. So we try to reduce the time, reduce the, the money, I mean, the fee that the private sector have to pay. So these are just a few areas that, I mean, just few examples that I want to inform the forum today. But again, to have a better productivity is something that we must do. And example for, like I mentioned, the agriculture sector, we have so far pretty much depend on, I mean, the growth of this sector depend pretty much on the land frontier. We have, but in the last 4 or 5 years, you can see that the agriculture sector growth is low. But it's not that we don't produce anything. We have produced a lot. Rice, mango, longan, durian, coconut, all rubber, cashew nut, all the those agricultural crops or industrial crop have been grown, and the growth in the past has, I mean, the production itself has increased significantly. But again, to move forward, land frontier is no more. So to move, I mean, to have a higher agricultural growth rate is only through productivity. So this is something that I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fala. We noted that high productivity is an important prerequisite for Cambodia's progress ambitions. And for this, there are certain prerequisites to front load in a way, relating to infrastructure, logistics, but also, incentives for the right investments, for high quality investments, for product with high value added. And all of this would require the development of the human element, that would need to be trained to be able to respond to the expectations and to the needs of going, a notch up in productivity and in terms of competitivity, on certain niche sectors in the region, but also globally, I hope. From what you said, I would like to pick on the first element, which is the infrastructure, Jyotsana. And Jyotsana Varma is the incoming ADB country director. She has been working in the development arena for 29 years. 12 years with the Asian Development Bank and 17 years with the government. So she really understands both sides of the game in a way. Jyotsana started ADB in 2009 in the corporate secretariat, moving to Southeast Asia department to serve in the Greater Mekong sub-region secretariat. In 2017, she moved to Bangladesh before joining as country director in Cambodia. She led the Maldives team, managing the country coordination office and coordinating the country program and portfolio. She served in the Indian Civil Service since 1992, and she led large district and state teams to implement social sector projects and served in the policy advisory team of the Indian Finance Minister. With this introduction, Jyotsana, we heard a lot about infrastructure. ADB is one of the biggest investors in Cambodia on infrastructure. What is the link to this? If you can a little bit demystify, this link between infrastructure and sustainable development, which is green, which is resilient, which also people-centric. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Alissar. So the person with the least qualification has the biggest CV. I'm sorry about that. But yes, thank you for the question, and thank you, ASG and Excellencies, for your inputs. ADB we enjoy a very strong partnership with the government, and we have a large and a diverse portfolio. We have about $2.5 billion worth of portfolio today. And you're right, infrastructure does play a very important role. I would say it's more than 50% of our portfolio today, mainly in water and urban services infrastructure, in transport, in irrigation. But we also work in other sectors that the other panelists talk about: education, skills, agriculture, and finance. So the development mandate of ADB is such that inclusion, people-centric projects, and climate resilience, they are integral to our projects, even if they are infrastructure projects. We do climate proofing of all our projects. We undertake a lot of upstream work. We bring in a lot of experts and consultants to ensure that the project design includes all these elements of inclusiveness and of climate resilience. I can give you an example of the rural roads project that we have had 3 of. It's still under implementation. It's core infrastructure, transport sector, but it has several features for climate resilience, for adaptation measures, for emergency preparedness and response. And even on the inclusion side, we prepare very strong gender action plans for, say, road safety. We involve communities in the campaigns around the project, and we include women and children. So even in infrastructure projects, and not only in design, but when we implement them, we monitor them to see that the impacts reach the communities that they were intended for. And we also evaluate our projects to learn from them and then better design our future project. We also have projects with a strong climate focus, which are standalone. We are at the moment processing a coastal marine fisheries project, so which will have a direct impact on the environment. So if I were to take together all our projects, 100% of them would either have inclusion or climate change or both in all projects. So whether they are infrastructure or not. So maybe in the last 2 years, for instance, we had 9 projects and 7 of them had climate action resources brought to it. And the other 2 were in skills and education. In this year, in 2022, we have 10 projects, and of them 8 have climate adaptation and mitigation elements. And in fact, 24% of our resources this year will be going to climate change. But we want to do more. In ADB's strategy 2030, we want to scale up our climate action commitments to $100 billion, reaching up to 2030. So clearly we want to be the climate bank for the Asia and Pacific. And that we hope to do by strengthening our engagement with clients, with mobilizing more financing, with bringing in better bankable design projects, and also expanding our policy-based lending to strengthen policy in these areas. We have a new country partnership strategy coming up next year. And I assure you that both inclusion and climate change, people centricity will be strong features of our upcoming strategy. Maybe I stop there.
Thank you. Coming back to the LDC graduation, which many of us see it as an opportunity, will the funding or will the lending, ADB's lending be changed, or, change either scope or, form, or after the LDC graduation? And how can the country prepare itself for the decrease in the ODA? And what other modalities or sources do you see as possible financing options for the development agenda, for continuing the development agenda for Cambodia in the near future?
Thank you, Alissar. That's a great question. And personally, I think it's a matter of great pride for the country to be, to be graduating to the next level. And it must happen. It reflects the great progress that has been made in the country. And Excellency Boris referred to the sustained 7% growth. So it will be reflected, and there will be a challenge of traditional sources of financing probably dry up. However, as ASG said, that other sources of financing will come in. It is the way to move forward. ADB, however, has no change in its lending policy based on graduation, and we will continue to bring in concessional resources in the country. And just to give you an idea, we bring about, or say over the next 3 years, $400 million of extremely concessional financing per year. We also have several grant resources and technical assistance resources, so that will continue. But however, in time, what will happen that because Cambodia will have better access to funds, so Cambodia will become eligible for additional concessional resources, and also they will become eligible for market-based resources from ADB. And maybe grant resources we may see a shrinking there, but then it will be offset by the larger pool of resources that will be available, and also the availability of private sector resources. His Excellency Panpala hinted towards that, and I feel that as the country develops, and we are already seeing this economic diversification going up, more and more manufacturing. You mentioned high engineering, automotive industry coming in, higher level of services coming up. And we are partnering with the government in a number of areas and initiatives to leverage private sector investment. And these are, of course, relating to strengthening policy, as you mentioned, to attract investments, and creating more, say, special economic zones, specific actions like that to improve trade and competitiveness. And of course, our endeavor is also to create an enabling environment and ecosystem and architecture for businesses to come in, to thrive, whether, one example could be availability of affordable electricity, right? So that is something that we are all working towards. Access to finance for SMEs, it's a big constraint, and creating a pool of skilled labor that we talked about, and also, matching the skills of this labor pool with what the industry actually needs. And we are also working for strengthening capital and bond markets so that a larger investor base is available to businesses in Cambodia, and strengthening PFM and domestic resource mobilization. And as the economy grows, higher economies of scale will be available. So there'll be a greater pool available for domestic resources as well. And the graph that Ivan showed us, all those lines will actually move up. And So what I'm saying is that there is no cause to despair. There will be other resources, and I would like to end with an example of a project that we have brought in Cambodia a couple of years ago, the National Solar Power Project. It's a 100 megawatt grid-connected solar project. So ADB's Office of Public-Private Partnership had an advisory mandate with EDC, Electricity de Cambodge, and they structured this financing. The winning bidder was actually given a loan from our private sector operations department, and our sovereign financing helped the project bring in attached roads and the electricity station, the substation there. So what I'm saying is that this kind of projects and these are all different financing. They're not only concessional financing, they're also commercial financing here. So these are the kind of projects that will come. And I must say that as the Asian Development Bank, we really look forward to working with the government in this exciting new phase. So thank you for asking me this question.
Thank you. I would like now to open the floor, to the audience, because this is a dialogue. We'd like it to be a dialogue, with the panel. Before this, like maybe, to mention that the government has been working on an integrated framework, national framework for financing its development, and that it is very important to keep the vision, the planning, but also the budgeting, talking together. And from the Integrated National Financing for Development framework, we have launched with the ministry last week the SDG investors maps, which will also bring, the private sector as a key actor in implementing the development agenda of the country. I hope that the government can refine these tools as they advance in their reflections and they're refining their vision to attain their progress ambitions. So maybe this also will provide a roadmap to coordinate our work and our contribution to the country, under the leadership and the vision, national vision. From this, I would like to open the floor and perhaps I would like to call on Minister of Women's Affairs. Sorry to surprise you, but I think, Women Affairs, yeah. What did I say? No? Of women affairs to really, to bring out the gender element of development and of the thinking and the reflection, taking into consideration also the socioeconomic development ambitions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little bit surprised. I'm coming just to listen to having more information. Thank you for giving me the floor. What can I say? I think that, as I said to Excellency the last time, I said that gender issues is a cross-cutting issue. It's a little bit complex. It's related to a lot of issues to society, to social, economic issues. However, some reflection maybe can be raised here. We talk about inclusion. I think that inclusion is really a positive factor to accelerate the speed of growth. Because if you still neglect, half of the population, I think it's not just in Cambodia, but worldwide, it's more than half of the population. Probably the growth will be slowed down if you neglect them. In Cambodia, the government is taking care of, and my colleagues know that we have a gender equality policy. Of course, there is a commitment. However, we need to enforce the commitment, especially in this transformation process. Now, with the COVID, there is an acceleration of this transformation, especially how we can enter, how we can include half of the population into the digital era. And I agree with you, Excellency, talking about the human capital development. Yes, I agree. The development of a country, the speed of the development of the country is relying on the human capital. More skilled they are, better the country will be developed. talking about vocational training, tertiary education. The last time I saw in the midterm review of the NSDP, the National National Development Strategic Development of the country. And I was surprised is the tertiary education. I was surprised because the rate of the access to tertiary education is less than 30%. I was a little bit surprised because we have done a lot of progress. However, if the rate is still low, I think we cannot access and we cannot speed our recovery. So probably we need to look at the tertiary education, the access, the enrollment, and look also on the dropout, because it's not just registration, but also the dropout. And especially for girls. And this is also the directive I received from the Prime Minister is to look at the access and the enrollment and the rate of dropout of girls in tertiary education. Tertiary education is not just enough, but we need also to guide them toward the right one, and especially to the STEM field. I'm not just talking about girls, but also all students, girls and boys, to the STEM field. It is a need, and this is something that you cannot go back. You have to accelerate and enable them to access to. Another thing is economic, talking just on education. This is something that we need to really put a high priority on, how we can move to a knowledge-based society for competitiveness. And of course, for girls, they have to catch up the gap. Talking about economic issues, inclusion means how women can also access to all the benefits that the growth of the country has, provided to all people. And we talk about entrepreneurship. This is one of the driving force for the economic recovery. And of course, in entrepreneurship, we have a lot of micro and small enterprise, how we can enable them to grow, to be sustained in the time, and also to go into the formal economy, not staying in the informal economy, which is one of the vulnerable sector, how we can protect them. So a lot of course, women are in. So how can we protect their rights? How we can empower them to sustain their enterprise to grow? And I think that we have a lot of initiatives already. The Skill Development Fund, the SME Development Fund. After that, you go to the private sector with the SME Bank. But how we can step up with all those micro entrepreneurs. I had discussed with you, Mrs. Varma, the last time about the center which train those women to step up in order to access to the project established by the Ministry of Finance, Economy and Finance. Talking this about economic issues, inclusion, and of course, the social protection. We would like to have this, we call the health coverage, the universal health coverage, which is part of the social protection. So this is something that we need also to put the inclusion inside, but not just inclusion of women, but all vulnerable groups inside the social protection. Without social protection, even you develop the human capital, without social protection, there is no possibility to really accelerate the well-being of people, because they are working, but if there is no social protection to protect their right, to protect their health, I think that this is something that we need also to look at the inclusion in social protection. In Cambodia, women are already in. A lot of initiatives have been done, especially for women who are pregnant. I said to you last time, we need also to talk about the old people, how we can protect the rights of old people now, because with this expectancy of life which is a little bit longer, especially for women, which is longer now. So how do we protect the rights of all women? And also, we need also to look at vulnerable women who are like the disabled people, disability, maybe more measure for disabled people, yes, especially for women. I think that this is what I can say. Maybe I can add more, listening to other speakers first, and probably I will take the floor later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and sorry for surprising you, but I could not let the opportunity not to benefit from your insights, particularly on this important issue of women and girls. I don't know if the panel would like to add or react, or should we open to more? Okay. Any more, intervention? Dr. Hood? Thank you. Dr. Hood is from the Ministry of Economy and Finance.
Okay, good morning to speakers, good morning to all the participants. I think it's very important that speakers as well as our nice moderators have speak a lot. I just pick up just one issue related to the financing source. I think Madam Kanni also mentioned about the cost of financing. Dr. Ivan presentation also focused on the financing side. My boss here, he also mentioned about the financing source. So we know that in the futures, we want to have a sustainable and inclusive growth for everyone. And Dr. Umitapovi just mentioned about the genders. That's very important. So I can see there are long process to go. By 2024, we talk about the LDC graduation. And by 2030, we talk about the middle income country MIC status. And by 2030, 2050, we talk about the high income status. So we look at the period a little bit short, and a lot of things need to be financed in terms of infrastructure, the hard infrastructure mentioned by our ADB country director here. We mentioned about how to have a good platform architecture for the business, for the private sector to have a better business environment. We talk about education, human resource development in the future. So everything needs to be financed. So I just wonder, is there any policy direction from the development partner, especially the ADB and the UN system here, to provide some more grace period for Cambodia when Cambodia graduates from the LDC? And Madam Kanni mentioned that graduation is not a challenge. This is more or less more at the opportunity side. But if you can provide us some grace period from 2024 to 2030, 2050, that we have some more opportunity to have more possibility to make sure that everyone will be included, and then to be shared from the growth, from the economic growth, that everyone is included. So that in line with Dr. Ungkantapa, we mentioned about economic inclusion, as well as something that everyone have to be protected. So no one is left behind, and everyone benefit from the prosperity of our economic growth. So grace period is very important for Cambodia. Thank you.
Are there any, interventions? Yes, please. I don't see, so perhaps. Okay, so I'll take the back and come back to you. Back, the lady back, yeah. Please present yourself. Yes, and the one.
Thank you, Madam Moderators, and please accept my respect to the esteemed panelists. My name is Sapon Pien. I'm the National Director for Oxfam in Cambodia. It's been refreshing to hear from our panelists this morning on a lot of things that I think appears heard on the news, but there's a lot of, I think that has been, embedded in the government's policy, but today has been revealed. I have three questions. The first question is going to Madam Kanni. You mentioned about the lack of preparedness in the times of shock or crisis. And we understand that during COVID-19, the government of Cambodia especially has been working really hard to build our institution, to strengthen our response capacity, and at the same time looking at the future pathway on how we build a resilient community. Looking at our experience and the experience of other countries, maybe in the Asia Pacific, is there anything that you believe Cambodia should consider to inform our shock responsive strategy to, to continue to thrive in the times of crisis? And my next question is going to Excellency Panpola.
If you allow me, can we keep it one question to give everybody for inclusion and then we return to you?
Can I have
Is it
quick one
okay?
to Excellency Panpola?
Okay, if you insist.
Yeah, this will be short. Excellency, you mentioned the importance of us thinking and moving away from land and labor toward productivities. And there has been a highlight on the importance of investing in TVET, but I would like to hear from you how aligning this strategy and other sectoral investment, for example, education, which is the foundation of the country human capacity, how this aligns with the thinking now and how much we have already focused on investing in strengthening our education system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I invite the lady in white, please? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for a wonderful panel discussion. My name is Debbie Muirhead. I'm the new health economist for WHO in Cambodia. So loving the link between health and economy. So my question is probably an obvious one when we're talking about productivity, Excellency Fala, which was wonderful to hear about, and also the aging population. I guess I'm wondering where investing in health as the other main component of investment in human capital and human capability occurs here, particularly in Cambodia with now the big, with the ongoing transition and NCD burden, which Cambodia's economy, UNDP and WHO investment case for NCDs showed that out of the $1.5 billion lost per year due to NCDs, 1.4 billion of that to the Cambodian economy is due to workforce supply and productivity issues. And also as we talk about the aging population, and I know that Excellency Boros and I have had a discussion about this, investing in health now to support the productivity of the aging population in later years is crucial, as well as resilience, as we've talked about, to future pandemics. So I'd be very interested to hear from particularly Ministry of Economy and Finance, what the view on investing in health is, which has gone up during COVID, but how do we protect that investment in health for resilience, social protection, and the future productivity for Cambodia?
Thank you and welcome to the extended team.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I will invite His Excellency Secretary of State of the Ministry of Post Telecommunication. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Alissar. Yeah, just get tempted to ask. I think since such a wonderful panel, so I'd like to say Tapavi, Excellency, panel, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for putting together a very wonderful event, and I think there's a lot of decision maker here on the table. I just can't help to ask some questions that I think maybe can help find some understanding going forward. I think what's also important is also what's going on behind the workshop, whether there's real momentum behind, because I think we have many discussions and many events, and as you know, and I think the panel has raised many things that are very relevant for Cambodia today, and even our governments are focusing a lot on many issue on not just issue, but I think looking forward on digital transformations and anticipating where Cambodia can position ourselves in the future, right? I think one of the, I was just looking through the presentation, I think one of the slide mentioned that, the traditional economic growth, is not working anymore. So what's beyond just focusing on economic growth? And as you know, digital transformation will change the whole landscape. So when you focus on productivity, what does that mean? In terms of, because you could just aiming for the old skills or maybe new skills that, or there's something beyond that. So I'm just trying to understand, maybe addressing to the panel, beyond economic growth, what kind of economic model, a new economic model that is emerging that, panels are thinking, and what Cambodia could focus on now, and prioritize, because I think we have so many groups, initiatives, we have a council, we have committees. I think we're all thinking of the same thing, but it's just how to bring this momentum together and where to start, because everybody's starting in different places, but I think how to connect and coordinate everybody to look in the same direction. And I think that's probably boils down to what model we want to develop for Cambodia in the future. So this question addressed to the panel. So what kind of model do you see, and what can we do here right now in Cambodia? Thank you.
Thank you. Allow me, I'm coming back to the side of the room, but I would like to take a couple of questions from the universities connected online. The question goes as follows. Greetings, honorable panelists and everyone. There is a question from the National University of Management students. The question is, how do we, youth, contribute to the policies and the development progress, especially our goal to become high middle income country in 2030 and high income in 2050, besides just sitting, studying in class? Thank you so much. So this is, a very, candid, but also challenging question that I would also like, the audience, but also perhaps the panel to respond to. Do we have something from the National University so that we can take them both at the same time? No? Okay. So Omar has left. Well, can we respond to the questions and then, see if anybody else from this side of the room would like to contribute?
Well, let me just take a few of them, but excellent questions, but also issues that have been raised, and I'm sure we will hear a little bit more from the grace period issue. But what we have learned here is you have a clear path with multilateral lending institutions, because they have very clear, transparent criteria that is established, whether it's ADB, World Bank, EIB, KfW. This is, there's clarity. So you would know where you stand. The issue always with grace periods is how strong is your bilateral negotiations. And we are right now supporting a lot of work, was in fact Jyotsana in Bangladesh, who are determined to keep to their LDC graduation. I always say LDC is a term that comes from the 18th century. We should not be, no one should define anyone as a LDC. So in doing this, it is, I hope, a very activist policy from the Cambodian government side to already be strongly negotiating those bilateral, because those change, and your strength of your offer will determine the grace period with each bilateral, whether it's on GSP plus, whether it's with the Canadian, Australian markets, and then the cost of money. I would only say here, as a lesson learned, is that too many of our countries that moved into MIC quite fast also chased bad money, very expensive money with, and hence stumbled into debt default. If you look at the default rates, it's mostly with commercial lending at very high rates, short repayment periods and very tough to negotiate once you hit a wall. By the way, just like our personal credit cards, no different when we take out bad debt as a country. I want to say on the preparedness or pandemics issue, and I want to link that also to the wonderful question raised and issue raised by our WHO colleague. There were two things that came out so strong as which showed countries, either those that rapidly are recovering and rebounding from the pandemic, and I'm purely talking now the pandemic, to those who are still struggling. And the first, way ahead of everything else, were surveys that showed high trust in public institutions. Countries where citizens said we have high trust, and public institutions and leaders provided accurate, constant information to the public. That was by far the topmost criteria on the ability to respond. The second was the pre-investment in public health systems. And this again was the ability then to rapidly move on vaccination campaigns. I mean, look at the high rate of vaccine coverage in this country. But I think our WHO colleague is very right that it is now those hidden health burdens, the NDC burden, NCD burden, that is really undermining. And when we say underlying conditions, these are not just underlying health conditions. These are then underlying economic, social conditions as well. And maybe another one to quickly pick up on is on young people and their aspirations for the future. And this is where I think I was talking yesterday with the Minister of Environment and saying, you know, young people are betting on a cleaner future. So they don't want to see things that their parents and grandparents went through in the past, including on conflict, including on choices that were not healthy ones. So I think the move into education for the future, the new tech, the new tertiary skills, you cannot grow a country on primary education alone. There is no country that has benefited. So, you know, when I am coming from Afghanistan, and I was discussing there that if a country does not allow its half of its population to move into continue with technical and tertiary education, the country is left behind, way behind. So I hope, I love the question from the university. I hope you are part of a innovation culture, a startup culture that is part of the new competitive Cambodia. Because let us be honest, in this region alone, the competition is high. I mean, look at labor productivity in some of the countries just in the neighborhood. So I think this is huge. But I do want to kind of say in all of these queries, I think you've brought up a key issue that sometimes we see the world too often through constraints. We're constantly talking about challenges and constraints and not about smart choices. And I think here, certainly from a number of people I've met, both in government and non-government, among our partners, our UN colleagues, there's this sense that there is space for smart choices. So when you hear the word fiscal constraint, please convert that to fiscal choice. It is choices that we make, whether we have a little bit of money or a little more. It's smart choices. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think I have a few questions. First one is regarding, you know, the alignment between different levels of education, primary, tertiary, TVET. Definitely, you know, I mean, I do agree with the comments of from Minister of Women's Affairs that we need to invest more in tertiary education. But again, in terms of alignment between the primary and TVET and tertiary, there are policy there. I think you may have known that right now for students that they don't want to continue to high school, they can move to TVET, for education. And for those who complete their high school, then they can go for university or they can come back to TVET. So these are the policy that we have in place. But again, the issue here is, we need to have more investment in all. Of course, primary education, we have invested heavily in the last 10 years. But again, more investment on tertiary, and again, more investment on TVET. Regarding the question on health, yes, we do agree that we need to invest, not only in human capital, but also in health. In our economic recovery strategy, we consider resiliency as one of the major component for future of this country. In that resiliency, of course, there is a social protection element in there. And, of course, and I want to inform, the forum today that our Prime Minister have decided and assign us from the Ministry of Economy and Finance to formulate what we call the strategy on the development of informal economy. To move, to transform those that are informal to be formal. So right now we are, the Ministry of Economy and Finance is leading this preliminary study, but soon we will have what we call interministerial working group from those important ministries. I can say Ministry of Social Affairs, Ministry of Women's Affairs, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Education will be, and I think Ministry of Health and a few more ministry will be on this working group. How we can, turn these people. What the Excellency Minister of Women's Affairs just mentioned. How, let's say, for women in the informal economy to be formal. We will have a study and set up a policy or strategy on that. Not sure whether it's a strategy or policy yet, but then, there will either one of these, once we get a bit more further, then we will decide whether it's a strategy or policy. But from our preliminary discussion with those in the informal economy, what they are asking right now is the access to healthcare. That's one of their major requests, access to healthcare. This is an important because, in the past, I think what we have seen is a huge progress in terms of well-being of Cambodian people. But again, once they have big health issue, then this is one of the reasons that they fall back into poverty. So investing in health is one of the one of the important measure that we will have to implement. And I think we have discussed about possibility of universal health coverage. My colleagues, I think he knows more than me, but we are in discussion of how we can move or what are the costs and pros and cons of this scheme, right? There's a question, I think, from Excellency Putiwot from MPTC, whether there's a new economic model. I think the model itself doesn't change, in terms of how we can develop the economy, but only the component in there that change from time to time. Of course, you may have understood, you may have heard, what we call in the past, import and substitution model and export substitution model. So now, and then they came to what the knowledge economy, now they call digital economy, whatever. Of course, the component, the focus will shift from time to time, from, based on the development in technology, based on the development in society. But again, I think the fundamentals are still there. The investment in human capital, the investment in infrastructure, the investment in public service, are still all there. So once, let's say, right now, if the world has moved into digitalization, so I think the focus of our policy can shift to that direction. But again, at the end, it's a human capital that you must have. I mean, you must focus on how we can improve them, but in a different direction, not only like in just a semi-skill, but into skill, and also like our student right now. Before, they didn't have any digitalization skill to make, but now I think to move forward, they have to have this kind of a skill in themselves, to move forward, to be excellent in the future. So for me, I think you have raised the coordination. I totally agree. We have a lot of policy, we have a lot of strategy, and done by different ministry, different institutions. But again, I think the coordination need to be improved, and it must be efficiently coordinated, so that this policy and strategy can be implemented and can go in the right tandem. Finally, regarding the youth, I want to, I think I totally agree with what Madam Kanni just mentioned about what they should do. And of course, to look into the future as an opportunity rather than, constraints. I think right now, what the youth, they have a lot of opportunities, but it's up to them whether they can grab. And of course, study in, from school, from university alone is not enough. You must be active to join in the society. You must be active, and you have to know what is the trend in the future. For example, digital is something that important for your future. You must have some knowledge on that. You have to catch the trend, understand. Otherwise, you will be left behind. And one last point. I think, the Cambodian context is different from other, and you have been born after the war. So you may not know the difficulty that, the war, what the war caused. So I think, joining all together to maintain this peaceful environment and peace in the country is important.
Thank you, Dr. Falai. Very important point on maintaining peace and stability. The rest of the panel, would you like to answer or to have a final word on before we close? We're nearly getting to the hour.
All right, I want to just touch on some answers also. I think I want to respond to a bit on XCC Putterwood asked about the old skill and the new skill. I think the new skill is really important, right? In terms of lifting the landscape. I think I used to speak with them and I said, this is a game changer. This will bring our society into another level. They're able to compete at for economic modeling that will shape the new future of a country. But I think we cannot walk away from the old skill either. When you actually talking to marginalized people, you realize that they cannot adapt to what maybe is a new skill. You will see disability people, elderly, it's really hard to change them and adapt to what is maybe the future skill needed. You're gonna have to go back to how to farm, how to raise chicken, how to do things that may be a bit more adaptable to that current livelihood. So I think if you're able to dissect a population group, you will able to see the different skill will fit a different group. And of course, what I'm saying here is not a majority issue here. I'm talking about maybe the marginalized group that we are looking at about. We still have 1 million elderly, and 1 million people are elder. We still have about 500,000 people are disabled. So those are huge number that we have to really tailor-made a skill set to fit them in order to make them contribute to the society and able to have a good livelihood for them. I want to touch on the last one, maybe for the kids, for the youth in here that we raised the question. I love this question. It's too much. I'm sorry, Alissar.
No, go
this
ahead,
question
please.
is so important for me because I believe this is where we want to go, right? So, guys, you know, when you ask, besides study and sitting, what else you can do? I want you to go back and understand how Elon Musk did it, right? In history of humankind, there was never anyone that make over $100 billion. Never. In 1 year, he able to do it, right? In 1 year, right? And that at age 19, I think age 19 or 20, somewhere around your age, he was living in his paid $200 for his friend in the, for a couch, right? In the US to study, and so he can learn. He had no money. How do you do that, right? Even Jack Ma right now, you can even look at that those models. So what I'm saying here, after evaluation, what I understand is this. First, you have to understand how the society of human are built. Why do we have job? Why do we have economic? Why do we have salary? Why do we have money? And then I think both Kanni and Panpala was talking about, okay, how does the trend go? So what does it mean by being the trend? How will it change too? At the same time, you start to see yourself, how are you going to fit in the future of it, right? Is your skill after you graduate be needed for it? Or will it not be needed? We need leader. We need people with skill, not we. I'm saying we is wrong. The society need it. You guys have, they have to start learning how to add value to the society to become their leader. So if you can become the Elon Musk, the Panpala, the Kanni of the world, or the Alissar, or even the Minister of Women Affairs in the future, you have to understand how they get there, and you have to create yourself to become that person. And I think if you can do that, world is the limit for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Allow me to, I know we're close to midday, but there is a student, Cambodian student connecting from Thailand who is asking, you know, would like to ask a question. Can you go ahead, Noon? Yes, they will read it out, yeah, because of connectivity issues, yeah.
And good morning, esteemed panelists. Please allow me just to read the question from Pana Kau, Cambodian student in Thammasat University in Thailand. Here is the question. Social protection in Cambodia is in its initial stage of development, leaving the poor, near poor, and vulnerable populations in a situation of an inadequate standard of living, maybe due to a lack of prioritized policy program, low funding of social protection schemes, and inadequate data management capacity in the social protection program. So how the government and relevant stakeholders going about to ensure there is an inclusive and comprehensive social protection in Cambodia? Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. I think this is really a relevant question at the moment. I think you read it all. We have problem in terms of how do the data, is it available for us to solve problem? And right now we are looking at near poor, and I already talked about our near poor population right now is still, we need to add scheme into it. And even the near poor, we are looking into it, and that's just let me share this potential thinking. So right now, the poor family that are we currently giving cash transfer is about 700,000 people, and about 3 million people in it. Yeah. So those are an average about $40 a month. We are right now concerned about the potential impact of the economic impact that from the current Ukraine war, where it would cause right now, maybe causing a certain grade of inflation in Cambodia. So we are thinking right now how to even protect the next group that near this poor family group. So we are looking to the term near poor, I said earlier, the next vulnerable group. Who are they? How do we assess them? And how can we support them even right now? So right now, I think maybe in the next year, we are committed to have an identification system putting out by Ministry of Planning. And I think Economic and Finance right now is also looking at the budget right now to maybe looking for a way to support this, but not regularly, but how to really lift them, protect them before this, under this, the current situation. So to give you a correct answer on this, what are we doing? So this is a problem when these data were lost in the past in a certain field. And with the power of fiscal space that was decided, but without enough data to support, when operator like Ministry of Social Affairs were not able to understand the full scope of the problem, we are not able to work together, and we're not able to solve any problem at all. So I think for what I'm saying now, we at the early stage of learning to work together to really solve, to really understand the full picture of the elephant. Is it the leg? Is it the head? Is it the ear? When we all put together all this image of what the elephant looks like, we know how to feed them, right? So right now, I think this is what exactly, and I think my colleagues here, Sipan Pala, and under the leadership of Ministry of Economic and Finance, we have walked this path right now. And this is not happened for maybe you start seeing resolve maybe only right now, maybe the next 3 years. But we are doing this for over 4 or 5 years, or maybe even like the last 2 terms now. But the results start to come slowly before you're able to change the perception and the way it worked in the past. What we're able to do is, I think the word is easy, break down the silo and start to build the ego, right? So right now we are starting to do this, and that's why I'm very motivated today also with the Sipan Palas here to present all this data on the table. We're constantly doing this behind the back door, and we also need to also allow all the stakeholders even here right now, because we are not able to do this alone either. Bring in stakeholders from the one partner, private sector, even NGO, to also come and have to raise all the problem together and to see the full elephant picture. So this is I would say that this is what we are doing, and hoping that collecting all this empowerment, we're able to continue to see the different challenges and come up with the different result. Yeah.
Thank you, Excellency Boros. A final reflection from Kanni, and I promise you I'll close on time.
Thank you. And I think always a pleasure to listen to these this ambition and these plans going forward. And as I said, I've been coming on regular visits to this country, and I think the ability to now put muscle and money behind the plans, I think is going to be the test. But let me just on that very fine last question, because it pulls out a couple of issues that I've been reflecting on across some of the countries in our region. And that the first is that, you know, the good thing with seeing the whole elephant and feeding it is the elephant is vegetarian. So already good environment. We should be looking not just at, you know, we're constantly looking at, as I said, on the where the cost of it is. But I think here the emphasis on looking also at the revenue side. Where can we generate more revenue as a country? And I think that attention to the revenue side I hope comes through much more, so that a pressure on the budget that allows then some of these public decisions and choices to be made. The second is, you know, when you ask someone who is very vulnerable, what category they fall into, they really don't care whether you're calling them extreme poor, absolute poor, near poor, almost poor. It's a sense, and it's interesting again, that in all of north, south, east, west, when you ask people what matters most to them, they don't put their poverty issue at the top of the list. They put a sense of fairness and justice, that they're treated with dignity and fairness. And so that we have to think through better how public policy and public services actually addresses that issue. And then with that, how you keep moving the data, the evidence to be able to better target, because you cannot afford to have everything universal. We'd love to have universal everything. But I would say if I had to go with one thing or two things to be that's universal, it is access to quality education for everyone and access to universal healthcare. I think these two, more than anything else, has shown a high return. And the last issue I wanted to bring out relates to this sense of dignity and fairness. And that is when it comes to this issue that was brought up by our student on social protection. Again, just think through the semantics, the language that we use. It is, we often will talk about welfare or protection, whereas to me, it's a sense of investment. No, it is you're investing with a high return. So it already shifts the way one thinks about investment in people as the highest return, the highest value that a country can put in anything it chooses. Not handouts, it's not charity, it's an investment. And therefore, as I said, it's a really smart choice. So it's really good to see how a lot of these conversations which have to enlarge in the public space, because you need not just government, you need civil society, communities motivated, engaged, you need private sector. So the larger the public debate and the public space for dialogue in these key issues going forward for the future of this country, I think this is a country one can easily bet on into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanni. It's very difficult to close after all the insights that we have received from the participants, but also from the panel. I will not pretend to summarize or anything. It's very rich, and I hope that we can continue the dialogue in different opportunities. I would like just to pick up on 3 points that resonated with me, at least personally, and I hope they would be of interest for you. Whatever is the model of development of Cambodia, it needs to be green, so the climate action is very important, because it is an investment in resilience and human security, but also an investment in the competitiveness of the country in the regional and global market. There has been a consensus, I felt, about investing in human development, and human development from its large sense, where health, education, opportunities, and capabilities all interact together, so that people, Cambodia, have a generation of high productive, high value added productivity and sectors. And the third one is really the need for a different way for financing the ambition of the future. And this different way would need to take into consideration what Kanni called, smart choices, because these smart choices would really, identify or precondition the trade-offs that the society and the government will be taking. And by default, it will also affect the type of money and the cost of money that will be put behind the development model or the development agenda of the country. With this, I think Cambodia, Cambodia's, the sky is your limit. And I'm saying this because I live, only because I live, but because I can see and we have been interacting with young people and, with the government, the next generation of leaders and others. And I have full faith that Cambodia would leap forward. It's always, like once you find the niche that you can leap forward and do it. So best of luck. And we're here, to support you and to support, the national vision and the national progress. Thank you to all who have followed up this discussion. And thank you for those who have contributed as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The policy dialogue on inclusive development model in Cambodia, poverty reduction, social protection, and resilience has now come to an end. In this regard, this amazing discussion would not have been possible without the insightful and engaging discussion from our moderator, our honorable panelists, and all distinguished guests, as well as the honor contribution from Her Excellency Dr. Angkantha Pavi, Minister of Women's Affairs. Thus, please kindly join me to give a big round of applause for this amazing dialogue. And last but not least, before we end this wonderful event, and on behalf of UNDP Cambodia, I would like to express my deepest gratitude for the great participations and valuable time in this policy discussion today from the beginning to an end, both those who joining physically and online. And we would like to apologize for any mistake happening unintentionally during the event. And as informed, lunch is provided at La Coupole. So please find our team at both exits of the hall for the lunch coupon. And we hope you have a great one. Thank you very much.